The year 2010 marks a critical turning point. Up until then, the United States had been the world's leader in manufacturing. But that year, something significant happened. China surpassed the United States to become the world's top manufacturing nation. It was a quiet shift, but it changed everything. Let's break it down with some stats. As of the most recent figures, China now produces 28% of the world's manufacturing output, while the United States lags behind at just 16% according to World Bank data. That's a huge gap, and it tells the story of just how much the balance of power has shifted. So what made China so successful? Enter the concept of the China price. What's that? It's the price point that China can offer due to its ultra-cheap labor, massive government subsidies, and unparalleled economies of scale. Simply put, China was able to produce goods faster, cheaper, and in greater quantities than anyone else. And that gave it a massive edge over other countries, including the United States. To understand why America lost its manufacturing edge, we need to look at some key decisions made over the years. It wasn't just about China's rise. It was about the choices the United States made that set the stage for this shift. First, let's talk about free trade agreements. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, in 1994, and China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 were both pivotal. These deals were supposed to boost trade and create jobs, but in reality, they made it much easier for U.S. companies to offload manufacturing to countries with lower labor costs, like China. Many companies took advantage of this by moving production overseas, seeking cheaper labor and better profit margins. At first, it seemed like a win-win, but over time, those offshoring decisions eroded America's manufacturing base. Then there's corporate short-termism. U.S. companies, under pressure to deliver quick profits every quarter, started outsourcing production to cut costs. Apple, for example, relies heavily on Foxconn, a Chinese company, to manufacture its iPhones. While this saved money in the short term, it also meant that American workers were losing out on jobs, and American companies were losing control over their production. And lastly, there's the issue of infrastructure. U.S. factories were aging, ports were becoming outdated, and the country's manufacturing infrastructure was no longer up to the task. Meanwhile, China was busy building modern, efficient industrial parks with state-of-the-art technology and facilities. The contrast couldn't be clearer. While the U.S. was letting its manufacturing base crumble, China was busy building an incredibly efficient system that would ultimately allow it to dominate global production. Let's take a look at how China's model worked and why it was so successful. At the heart of China's industrial power is something called state capitalism. Unlike the U.S., where companies are driven by profit and competition, China's government plays a huge role in its economy. The Chinese government provides massive subsidies to key industries like steel, solar panels, and electronics. These subsidies help companies produce goods at a much lower cost than their international competitors. It's like giving a race car an engine boost while everyone else is stuck driving regular cars. China just had more fuel in the tank. Another key factor: forced technology transfers. If foreign companies wanted to enter China's huge consumer market, they often had to give up their most valuable intellectual property. This meant that China could learn the secrets of advanced manufacturing, improve its technology, and become self-sufficient much faster than anyone anticipated. Companies like Apple, which needed access to China's market, had no choice but to hand over some of their best innovations. Finally, China's Belt and Road Initiative helped expand its manufacturing empire even further. The BRI is a global infrastructure project that's essentially a giant road and rail network designed to connect China to the rest of the world. By building ports, railways, and highways in places like Africa, China was not just creating new markets for its products, but also making it easier to control global supply chains. China's system wasn't just efficient, it was strategic and all-encompassing. The shift from U.S. manufacturing dominance to China's rise has had dramatic real-world effects, and the stories from both sides are strikingly different. In the U.S., former industrial hubs like Youngstown, Ohio, are now shadows of their former selves. Once a bustling steel town, Youngstown's factories closed down, leaving behind empty buildings and a struggling community. The loss of jobs led to more than just economic decline. It also contributed to a social crisis, with issues like rising addiction and declining life expectancy. Cities like Youngstown aren't alone. Many once thriving American manufacturing towns have become ghost towns, where the promise of a stable job and a bright future has all but disappeared. Across the Pacific, things look very different. Take Shenzhen, China, for example. In just a few decades, this city transformed from a small fishing village into a global tech powerhouse. Today, Shenzhen is home to some of China's most famous companies, like Huawei and DJI. What helped fuel this meteoric rise? A combination of government support, efficient manufacturing, and the ability to scale up quickly. The difference between the two stories couldn't be more obvious. One place saw factories close and jobs disappear, while the other saw an industrial boom that reshaped the global economy. Then there's the story of Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory. This massive plant was built in just 168 days, less than half a year. In contrast, building a similar factory in the United States can take years due to lengthy permitting processes and regulatory hurdles. This speed advantage allowed China to quickly build up its manufacturing capacity, while American companies struggled with bureaucracy. These contrasting stories highlight the gap between how the United States and China approach manufacturing. One is moving faster, building for the future, while the other is still grappling with the consequences of the past. After decades of outsourcing, shuttered factories, and lost jobs, there's a growing push in the United States to bring manufacturing back home. The question is, can America actually reclaim its manufacturing crown? One of the major steps toward reshoring production has been companies like Intel making big moves. For example, Intel recently announced a $20 billion investment in a new chip plant in Ohio. This is part of a broader effort driven by the U.S. government, including the CHIPS Act, which provides subsidies to bring semiconductor production back to American soil. These efforts are part of a larger trend to revive American manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign-made goods. But there's a challenge here: labor costs. Even with reshoring efforts, America still faces a major disadvantage. China's labor is significantly cheaper. However, automation could be a game-changer. The rise of robots and AI in factories could help offset the labor cost gap. Take Tesla, for instance. The company has pushed the boundaries of automation, building cars with far fewer human workers than traditional automakers. This unboxed approach to manufacturing could pave the way for a new, more efficient system in the United States. Another wild card is the shifting dynamics in China itself. Rising wages and ongoing geopolitical tensions, such as tariffs and the risks surrounding Taiwan, are putting pressure on China's manufacturing model. These changes could create opportunities for the U.S. to catch up, but it's far from certain. If the U.S. can overcome its infrastructure challenges, invest in new technologies, and make reshoring a priority, it might be able to reclaim a significant portion of its manufacturing base. As the U.S. and China battle for manufacturing supremacy, the world is beginning to split into competing supply chains. This phenomenon, known as decoupling, is shaking up the global economy. But what does this mean for the future? With tensions rising, especially over issues like trade wars and intellectual property theft, many countries are questioning their reliance on China. The US and Europe, for example, are increasingly looking to reduce their dependence on Chinese goods in manufacturing. This is where decoupling comes into play. Countries are now looking to diversify their supply chains. As a result, other nations are stepping in to fill the void left by China. Countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico are emerging as the new manufacturing hotspots. In fact, many companies are already moving production to these countries to take advantage of cheaper labor and less political risk. Vietnam, for example, has become a key player in electronics production as companies like Samsung and LG shift operations there. India's growing tech and manufacturing sectors are attracting investment, while Mexico is becoming a crucial partner for U.S. companies looking to nearshore their production. But there's another angle here: climate change. The push for green manufacturing could be a potential game changer for the U.S. In particular, industries like electric vehicle, EV batteries are seen as an area where the U.S. could potentially lead. With the global demand for EVs skyrocketing, America could focus on building a green manufacturing infrastructure to produce batteries and other key components. This shift towards sustainability might just be the niche the U.S. needs to get back into the global manufacturing race. As we wrap up, it's crucial to remember that the decline of America's manufacturing dominance wasn't some inevitable fate. It was a result of choices, policies, corporate decisions, and short-term thinking all contributed to the outsourcing of jobs and the loss of industrial power. It wasn't a natural shift. It was driven by decisions that could have been different. So where does that leave us? The future isn't set in stone. The U.S. has the resources, the innovation, and the potential to rebuild its manufacturing sector. It's a choice of whether the country wants to adapt, modernize, and take the necessary steps to reclaim its position on the global stage, or whether it will let China and others define the next century of industrial growth. The reshoring efforts, the advancements in automation, and the push for green manufacturing all point to possibilities. But the real question is, will America act on them? This isn't just a story about factories closing or opening. It's about the kind of economy we want for the future, the kinds of jobs we want to create, and the industries we want to lead. The ball is in America's court, but will it seize the opportunity? What's your take on the future of U.S. manufacturing? Do you think America can reclaim its manufacturing power? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want a deeper dive into reshoring success stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more.